take out your phone, okay? And I want you to look at the last 10 inbound phone calls that you've had. And I want you to think about the feeling that comes up with each person on that call list. That's your brand. That feeling that is generated around that person, that is their brand. That is the ephemeral feeling around their brand. So you need to think about when your program comes up on someone's caller ID, what is the ephemeral feeling that comes around you being in their phone? I would say to executives out there that brand is something that you really need to think about in advance before it is thrust upon you. And I just would like to point out once again, like we said in the episode, people already have a feeling about you, have a feeling about your program. You just may not know it yet. And so why not be on the front end of actually developing that expectation, developing that experience the way you want to be remembered, as opposed to the way people are going to remember you.
Most behavioral health programs are chasing leads, but the ones that win long-term, they've built something deeper. Welcome back to Mastermind. I'm your host, Mark Scrivener, and as always, I'm joined by my fabulous co-host, Jeff Skillen. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about today's episode.
Yeah, this is actually going to be a really good one. I've been looking forward to recording this episode with you. Man, it's going to be a good one. Today, we're breaking down brand versus lead generation and what actually creates a sustainable program. So, Jeff, just to dive into this episode, maybe what is brand in your eyes?
You know, that's a question a lot of people don't ask themselves enough. Here's the definition. So stick with me here, and I want to see if you agree with this. There's two sides to a brand. The first side is the story that you want to tell in the marketplace, and then there's the way people actually experience your service. And then your brand lives somewhere in between there. And so if you want to shape what your brand is, that gives you two levers that you can pull. You know, do I need to adjust the story that I'm telling in the market, or do I need to better understand how people are experiencing the service I provide?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You know, yesterday we had a CEO of a bank here, a large bank in Nashville, and they came in and we were talking about brand, and we talked about, you know, a lot of people think it's just the logo, the colors, the website, you know. I mean, all of those things are very important, but it's like, how do people actually, at every touch point, what is your brand saying about your business?
Well, it's interesting that you mention a bank, because banks are, in my opinion, very similar to healthcare, and specifically behavioral healthcare, where they haven't really had to differentiate all that much. I mean, you know, it was really a matter of, like, take the bank example. You know, we put branches in the right neighborhoods, and we have a website, and then, you know, people choose the service because they have to, and they don't necessarily have a lot of options. The difference now in banking, as well as behavioral healthcare and then healthcare, is that people want choices, and more people are having a lot more options. So you need to decide what your experience is going to be and how it's going to stand out based upon all the competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. What is the first touch point, do you think, that most people experience a brand? Is it they're doing research on the front end and they're reviewing a program's website, or is it, you know, that first call? How do you see that most people experience the brand for the very first time?
Well, you know, Mark, I think the reality of it is for behavioral healthcare, chances are, and then research backs this up, people are starting with a web search. They're starting with a web search because they've either got a situation or a family member that they know that they need to deal with, and there's some urgency behind it. So they're probably wanting to move fairly quickly, but they also want to make a smart decision, right? So then one of the first things that people do is they do a web search for services near them, and then what they're looking for is proof. What they're looking for is proof, and one of the best proofs that are out there are reviews. Mm-hmm. You know, that's where Google reviews and then your Google business profile makes a huge difference in terms of what are all the indicators that say I'm making a smart choice by reaching out to this organization. And so you've got to think about it. And I don't know how many program owners out there regularly do searches for their own services and see what they're competing against and then see what choices you're giving people to then, hopefully choose you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we talked about brand versus lead generation.
Right.
And I guess, why do so many treatment centers default to that lead generation as being, hey, this is the most important?
Well, I go back to our definition of brand in terms of how many people are really clear about the story they want to tell. Let's start with that part of it, and we'll get to the second part about the experience that people have with your service. But are you really clear about what you're good at? Or are you just basically like, hey, we just opened up shop and we'll take anybody that walks in the door? If you're really clear about what you have to offer and what your differentiation is, what are you doing to tell that story? Who are you putting out there to speak on behalf of that? Do you have really well-credentialed clinicians that can speak emphatically about that? Have you created content around that? That, like, let's just say, for example, that you want to create something that's, I don't know, let's just pick something out of the air, trauma-focused, okay? Let's say that you really want to focus on, we're going to be a leader in, trauma-informed or trauma-based care. You need to find a clinician that has the respect of other clinicians, who's out there speaking on behalf of that, and then can make that differentiator for you. Because the next thing that people look for is not necessarily the service you provide, but who are the people providing that service? And do they look like people that I can trust, people that I can relate to? And then is that something I'm going to feel comfortable, putting a loved one in their care?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they're looked at as thought leaders. They're putting themselves out as we're experienced. We know what we're talking about. We know what we're doing. You can see the content. You can hear the message.
Well, that's true. You don't necessarily want to come across academic. You want to come across as knowledgeable, credible, all of those things, but you also want to come across as approachable.
Yeah.
You want to come across as, I can easily sit down. I could see myself or my loved one sitting down with this person and then actually getting the help they need.
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about like lead generation being a primary growth driver is what a lot of program directors think. And so, the worst thing you could ever do is to drive a bunch of leads into a program that maybe doesn't have their brand all figured out. Every touch point
Right.
isn't flawless.
Right.
And so, it is good. You can get quick leads from, placing ads and whatnot out there. But, if your brand and your operations can't support it, which operations is a huge component of the brand.
Right. Well, so let's go back to who we think we are. Okay. And so you can address this in a couple of different ways. You can talk about what population I'm serving. It's like I serve geriatric population. I serve an adolescent population. I serve a young adult population. You can also take a swipe at, what pathology am I trying to address? I'm gonna focus on mental health. I'm going to focus on substance use. I'm going to focus on trauma-informed substance abuse. It's like there are lots of different ways that you can slice that, but you need to be clear about who you serve best. And then the other part of it is, what is my catchment area going to be? What am I going to be? A local player? Am I going to be a statewide player? Am I going to be a regional player? Am I going to be a national player? And, I just laid out 3 variables that organizations should really address in terms of, determining what story they want to tell. So what population, what pathology or what specific diagnosis you want to address, and then how do you address that regionally? If you don't go through those 3 steps, it's going to be very difficult to then inform your operations if you can't tell that story to your operations team.
Yeah.
So let's say you've done that work. Great. You've gone 1, 2, 3. You've done that work. You've already done more than a lot of organizations. Okay. Now you have an opportunity of talking to the clinical team, talking to your operations team, talking to your admissions team, talking to your marketing team, and saying, here's who we are, who's who we best serve. Marketing team, let's go out and generate leads based upon this profile. Okay. Admissions team, these are the leads that we're generating. Be prepared to answer these calls and make sure that you're finding the people that fit this profile that we're looking for. And if they don't fit our profile, we want to manage a smooth referral to somebody that can serve them. Okay? Operations. Here's the clientele that we're going to serve. Make sure that our facility is oriented, equipped, prepared for handling this profile. And then last, clinically, this is where we're going to drive our results. And we're going to do outcome studies that show that we can actually perform well with this population. If you get all of those things working in concert, you get all of those organizations and all of those aspects working in unison, singing off the same song sheet, so to speak, that's your recipe for success.
Yeah, and then lead generation is super important on driving in opportunities, or, not necessarily just driving in opportunities, reaching people out there that are in need at the time they're in need and getting them to the right treatment center.
Well, I mean, just throwing out some rough numbers, and there's statistics to back this up. We know that at any given moment, 8 to 10% of the population is in need for these services. Okay, so that's a pretty large swath of the population. Now, the challenge is not all of that 8 to 10% of the population is going to be seeking services. They might need them. They may not necessarily be seeking them. So, and then no organization is prepared to treat or support all of that population. So you want to recognize what segment of that population you're actually best equipped to serve, and then build your marketing strategy off of that profile that you're trying to seek.
We probably should have done this to kick the episode off, but maybe taking it back to the brand and talking about, you've brought up a couple touch points, but maybe we talk the audience through every touch point that your brand can be experienced.
Okay.
And so, you mentioned the website, and they're going to do research on you beforehand and take a look. Are you credible? Are your reviews showcasing the type of program you are and the type of treatment that you give? And then it goes, now I've made the decision based on what I've seen. They've got maybe they've got video content on there with thought leadership that talks to an individual of where they're at right there. So another component of brand, but it's all the online presence that a program has. Then you have the call, and it comes in, and it's, and you want to make sure the admissions team's trained up. You want to make sure they give great empathy during that call. You want to make sure they answer all the questions. That's another touch point. From there, let's talk the audience through every other touch point along the way, all the way to alumni that are really happy, successful, and supportive of the program.
Well, and there's also this whole other aspect of, you've got people in the community working with professional referral sources that can also further validate the mission of what you're doing. So organizations may call them outreach, they may call them business development, they may call them sales, but they're working with clinicians, they're working with primary care docs, they're working with hospitals to tell the story about your program, to then further validate and also draw in leads. The point being, all of them are going to end up on the front porch, which is the admissions team. The admissions team, I like to say, is the front porch of any facility. So how do you want that front porch experience to be? Do you want that to be welcoming? Do you want that to be hospitable? Do you want that to be, hey, let me tell you a little bit more about our program? Or do you want that to be, nobody greets you at the door and it's just like a supermarket where you just walk right in and then figure it out? There are various approaches to this,
Yeah.
And then if you want to get deeper into the various touch points, let's say that you've done everything right. Let's say that you've identified, the right profile. They have a great experience on the front porch with your admissions team, and then they come into your facility. You need to remember that now we've shifted into that second part of brand, which is, how are people experiencing the story that you've told them. Okay, so this is everything from the driver that picks them up at the airport. This is everything from the cleaning crew, the chef who prepares the meals. This is the people who wake them up in the morning. You've got to think about all the touch points that person is going to have within your facility and say, does that support the message that we've created in the marketplace. Here's an area where a lot of people really kind of fall down on this, and they assume that the only thing that really matters is those one-on-one sessions or those group sessions that they may get from the clinical team. Those are critically important. But what's more critically important, and then research backs this up, it's the day-to-day interactions of that line staff that's engaging with the person who's in your care that is the most powerful and the most impactful and means the most when it comes to satisfaction and then actually delivering the care that you promise that you're going to deliver.
Yeah. You mentioned the airport driver, they pick them up, and what's that experience like? And it's like, I was thinking when you said that, like, we've been to programs before that, maybe there's dead trees in the front yard,
Yeah.
maybe before they even get to the porch. To the admissions team, it's like, the grass is too long, the, light bulbs are burnt out if they were coming up at night, and it's too dark in comparison to this beautifully well lit. Some of the better ran programs that we've seen that build their brand that way, their landscaping is beautiful. When you pull in, it's everything from the landscaping to the lighting to just the experience they get of driving up for the very first time.
Well, this was a conversation that, our other co-host Lee Pepper and I were involved with. We've rebranded a number of programs. We had an experience where we had a beautiful website. We had plenty of calls coming in. And what was happening was that people were, they were arriving, they were driving up, and they literally were not getting out of the car because, like you said, it was like the curb appeal was really lacking.
Oh, wow.
It was really lacking, and it was not living up to the expectation that was set up on the website. So rather than addressing, the website, we're like, okay, we actually need to put some relatively low cost capital expenditures into this facility so that the experience actually steps up to the story that we're telling. So again, I'm looking at those two parts of brand that we're talking about. Our story was accurate. We were attracting the right people in terms of what we were delivering clinically, but the experience that people had was not in line with the story that we were telling. So we knew that we needed to bump that experience up so that people actually did get that experience.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Support for Mastermind comes from our sponsor, Snapshot Health. In the world of behavioral health, growth must be balanced with ethics and mission. Snapshot Health specializes in performance-driven marketing designed to help behavioral and addiction treatment centers. To learn how to build scalable systems for sustainable growth, visit the link in our show notes. I guess, we talked a little bit about the referral partners out in the community. Like, what are things that you see that programs can do to really build that brand with those folks?
Well, the first thing that I like to tell people with programs that I work with is like, you need to find out what people really think before you can influence them. You need to. So I would recommend doing a little bit of secret shopping and get a sense for what your reputation and what your brand is amongst the professionals that you want to be serving.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people don't necessarily do this, but there's an opportunity for you to, you could get friends, you can get colleagues, you can get family members, whomever, to ask their primary care. Ask, if they're seeing an outpatient therapist, hey, what do you know about ABC program? What, would you send someone there? Oh, really? Why would you? Why wouldn't you? Start to get feedback directly from those professionals. And, what's really illuminating is when people say, gosh, I don't even know anything about that program. So that if they don't even have an opinion, then that tells you, you've got, I'm going to say, a significant opportunity to go out there and actually build your presence within that professional community. I find more often than not, program owners think that they've already got a brand in that marketplace. They may have less of a brand than they realize, or it certainly may not be the brand they wish it were.
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody has a brand. Right. It's like, but is that brand what you want it to be?
I've got a great exercise. Yeah. Okay, so everybody that's listening to this can try this out right now. And if forget programs for just a moment, okay, take out your phone, okay, and I want you to look at the last 10 inbound phone calls that you've had. Okay, I want you to look at each one of those people on your phone, and I want you to think about the feeling that comes up with each person on that call list. Okay, so like right at the top, you might look at that and say, "Oh, I love hearing from that person." Okay, so there's a real feeling of love. There might be, "Oh, I avoid this person every time they call." There might be another person who would be like, "Oh, they're trying to sell me something." That's your brand. That feeling that is generated around that person, that is their brand. That is the ephemeral feeling around their brand. So you need to think about when your program comes up on someone's caller ID, what is the ephemeral feeling that comes around you being in their phone? What do you want it to be? Do you want it to be pushy? Do you want it to be empathetic? Do you want it to be caring? What do you want it to be? And then how can you change that?
Yeah. Jeff, you're so right. That's a great exercise. In fact, after the show, I'm going to do that. I hope your name doesn't show up in the top 10. So, no.
Okay, so Mark, let me ask. So when I show up on your phone, what is the ephemeral feeling?
I'm always like elated to answer that call. It's like I got to just answer it immediately. No.
No, you say no. That's not actually what you.
No, I do. I enjoy every time I see your name pop up. It is always joyful. Hopefully, it's vice versa too.
100%. 100%.
So
I realize that I may not always be effective in that, but I do want to make sure that when people see my name, for example, I do want someone to think there's going to be some value exchanged here. There's, something is going to happen that I'm going to be glad that I had this conversation. Even if I'm giving you bad news, I want you to thank me for giving you bad news.
It's a great call. Yeah. Well, like let's say a program has a very strong brand. How do you think that changes the economics of their marketing?
That is a great question, and it's one that some programs may think that this branding exercise may seem a little fluffy, but here's where it really plays out from a standpoint of economics. When you can generate a strong brand and it's really well understood what you're generating, and you've got content to support that, you're going to get more of that organic lead business that comes as a result of people finding you organically on the web, as opposed to as opposed to relying upon paid campaigns for Google ads and things like that, which are important. They can also drive your brand. They can generate more volume, but those nothing is more cost effective than that business development lead, that organic lead, things that are truly based upon word of mouth and genuine organic search. Those are your best quality leads. The challenge for folks is that a lot of times those don't generate the volume that you might necessarily need. So you want to have a mix of paid and then organic. But too much emphasis on either side of it really kind of gets your marketing portfolio out of whack.
Yeah. Why do you think that Jeff, so many executives undervalue the brand, or maybe misunderstand it of all these aspects? Maybe they don't value the brand as being like what we're talking about.
Well, I think the reason for that primarily is because a lot of organizations don't think it's important until things don't go well. Take an organization, let's just pick something out of the air, like Jiffy Lube, for example. Okay, does Jiffy Lube have much of a brand as far as you're concerned?
They do have a brand, but I don't know, positive, negatively, it's what you have to do.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to, is it's something that I have to do, and it's convenient, and it's something that I sort of recognize, right? It's based on location, it's based on price, it's based on convenience.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. That's a brand for them, and that's okay. Many people in healthcare believe that it's quote unquote something you have to do, just like you said, as it came to Jiffy Lube. And as a result, they don't think about the brand they're generating until it doesn't really work for them anymore.
Yeah.
And it's and then the notion of proximity and the notion of because I have to, and the notion, is something that I just need to do. What I like to say is it works until it doesn't. And then when it doesn't, it's much more expensive to solve the brand equation than it is to set up the brand equation in advance and then start to build your own tidal wave of opportunity, as opposed to waiting for things to crash and then you've got to, you're in a deficit mode.
Yeah. Like I would say for any like executive team out there listening to this, one book, and not to give people, book club to get into, but just one that I've came across recently, Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara.
Yep.
Like I actually even heard him speak, and, it's like at every touch point, he made his restaurant extraordinary, unreasonable.
And every touch point was like, I'm exceeding expectations.
Yeah, and he would take every department away. So the admissions team would look at what are every step that we interact with, a potential new patient coming in. Mm-hmm. It would be it would be any part of that. The marketing team, what is every touch point that a potential patient would like look at our program, and you make it unreasonable, from even the clinical care. It's like, how is that unreasonable? The alumni program, but he would take every team away and they would identify every touch point, and then they would go, how could we make this unreasonable?
Yeah.
And it was a great thing that put them on the map. They won the best restaurant in the world. And so, yeah.
I have not read that book. I'm sure that I'll be reading that and I'll just be like, cheering on every page. Because I so believe in that approach. There are two other books that I'm going to go ahead and toss out. Here's an episode that we need to do in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. We can arm wrestle about it now or later if you like. But there are two books that Rob Wagner, who was the CEO at Foundations, where both Lee and I, Lee was the chief marketing officer and I was a consultant there for a long, long time. He introduced a book to the management team called If Disney Ran a Hospital. And that was very illuminating. So that's a book that I think, it talk about bringing hospitality into healthcare. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend that one. Now, the episode the book that I want to do a further episode on is one that Chip Conley wrote. And this is the reason I like this one is it is much more sort of brand focused. He speaks about everyone who's listening to this is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Anyone who has studied psychology or the human condition has bumped into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, he breaks down marketing from sort of the Maslow pyramid. It was like Maslow's marketing hierarchy. And I think it would be fantastic for us to actually, maybe we can do some graphics and things where we break down the various levels of the marketing pyramid as he lays it out, because I couldn't think of anything, honestly, more on point about how to build a brand than what Chip Conley did.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about brand and building the brand today. We've talked about the lead generation, and, when they work in unison together, that is creating like just a program that is sustained for future growth.
Well, I mean, if you've defined who you are and then you actually deliver on those services, jittering the leads, not only is it easier, but those leads are more valuable because they're more sticky. You're getting the right fit for the program. So then when they land on your front porch, it's an easy entrance. It's an easy entrance into your program, and then that front porch becomes the place where everybody wants to hang out. I love front porch conversations, as you can probably tell.
That's awesome, yeah.
But it's like, I mean, when you're inviting the right people to your house, the front porch is a great place to be.
Yeah. Is there anything, Jeff, that maybe we didn't cover or maybe the audience would enjoy here? And I know we've talked about a ton, but I don't want to leave without...
Again, I would just go back to say that brand is something that may feel fluffy or something that... let me start over. I would say to executives out there that brand is something that you really need to think about in advance before it is thrust upon you. And I just would like to point out once again, like we said in the episode, people already have a feeling about you, have a feeling about your program. You just may not know it yet. And so why not be on the front end of actually developing that expectation, developing that experience the way you want to be remembered as opposed to the way people are going to remember you.
Yeah. Jeff, way to rock it out, man. Well, that's a wrap on this episode. On behalf of myself, Jeff, and the entire Mastermind crew, thank you for tuning in today. If this conversation triggered any questions for Jeff or I, please drop them in the show comments and we'll be sure to get right back to you. Make sure that you also help us by subscribing, rating, and reviewing Mastermind so that we can get this message out to more people. Until next time, this is Mastermind signing off.
That wraps up this episode of Mastermind. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, Mastermind is not just a podcast, it's a community. So don't forget to comment, subscribe, and review us. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you content that's relevant and relatable. Thanks again to our sponsor, Snapshot, a digital media marketing agency. And thank you for joining us on Mastermind, your behavioral health playbook.